She was only a teenager walking home, minding her own business. No crime, no noise, no harm. Yet, in an instant, her skin color became a weapon in someone else's eyes. A neighbor watched her every step, suspicion growing where innocence should have been seen. Then came the call that would turn a quiet afternoon into chaos. But what happened next wasn't just about a phone call. It was about power, prejudice, and a shocking truth that left everyone speechless. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon. Marcus, a 16-year-old high school student, had just left the local library where he spent hours preparing for his exams. He carried a backpack full of books and dreams, far bigger than the small town he lived in. Marcus wasn't the type to cause trouble. He was quiet, focused, and often described by his teachers as one of the most promising students in his class. For him, the walk home was a routine, a stretch of sidewalks he had traveled hundreds of times without incident. The neighborhood was calm, framed by tidy lawns and tree-lined streets, but behind its polished appearance, unspoken tensions always lingered. Marcus knew it, though he rarely let it show. His mother, a woman deeply respected in the community, had always warned him to keep his head down, to stay polite, to never give anyone a reason to doubt his place. That day, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the pavement, Marcus adjusted his backpack and kept walking. To him, it was just another walk home. But to someone else watching from a nearby porch, it was something different. To them, Marcus's presence was not ordinary, it was suspicious. And with one phone call, that suspicion would spiral into a chain of events that no one in the neighborhood would forget. Marcus turned the corner, the weight of his backpack pulling at his shoulders, when he noticed something unusual. A curtain on a nearby house shifted. The faint shadow of someone watching flickered behind the glass. He thought nothing of it at first. Neighbors often peeked through their windows. But this time felt different. The gaze didn't leave. It followed him. By the time he reached the next block, he heard it, the sound of a phone dialing. A woman's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the air, though he couldn't make out the words. She wasn't talking to him. She was talking about him, and Marcus knew it. His chest tightened, but he kept walking, trying to convince himself it was nothing. Minutes later, the echo of sirens pierced the quiet neighborhood. The sound grew louder, closer, until flashing red and blue lights washed over the street. Marcus froze, his heart thudding. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop beside him. Doors slammed. Officers stepped out, their eyes locked on him as if he were already guilty. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted. Marcus complied immediately, his backpack slipping to the ground. His mind spun. He hadn't done anything, just walked home like he always did. Yet, in their eyes, he was no longer a student, no longer a son. He was a suspect. The officers circled him, questions flying faster than he could answer. Where was he going? What was in his bag? Why was he here? Each question carried an assumption that he didn't belong. Marcus tried to speak, his voice shaking, but every word felt swallowed by their suspicion. Meanwhile, neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the flashing lights. Some whispered, some filmed on their phones. And standing among them was the woman who had made the call, arms folded, her face twisted in false certainty. She pointed toward Marcus, her lips forming the words, "That's him." Marcus felt the world closing in. His legs trembled, but he stood still, remembering his mother's warnings. Never argue, never resist, stay calm. But inside, fear collided with anger. How could a walk home turn into this? How could his existence be treated as a threat? The officers reached for his backpack, unzipping it as if they expected to find something dangerous. Books spilled onto the pavement, math notes, history assignments, a half-finished essay. The sight should have ended it. But instead, it seemed to harden their doubt. One officer glanced at the woman, as if waiting for her confirmation. She nodded. Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to scream that he was innocent, that he was just a kid trying to get home. But he couldn't. His voice felt trapped in his chest. The crowd grew, murmurs turning into judgments, and the moments stretched like an endless shadow. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't get worse, when Marcus thought he might be taken away for something he didn't do, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. A figure that would change everything. The officers closed in, their voices sharp, their hands hovering near their belts. Marcus stood frozen, every breath shallow, every heartbeat echoing in his ears like a warning drum. The crowd grew louder, phones raised high, their screens capturing his fear. To the officers, it didn't matter that he was a student, that his backpack was filled with books. To them, he was still a threat. One officer stepped closer, his shadow stretching across Marcus's trembling frame. His hand brushed the edge of his holster. The woman who had made the call smirked, as if justice, her version of it, was about to be served. Marcus's knees weakened. In that instant, he understood how quickly lives could be stolen, how easily a teenager could become a headline. Then, cutting through the chaos, a voice rose firm, commanding, impossible to ignore. "That's my son." The crowd shifted, heads turning. A woman emerged from the throng, her presence steady, her eyes locked on the officers. She wasn't just any mother. She was Dr. Elaine Carter, a civil rights attorney, known across the state for taking on cases just like this. The murmurs rippled instantly. People recognized her. The officers did too. Their rigid stance faltered, their confidence cracking. For a moment, silence blanketed the scene, an uneasy silence heavy with realization. The woman who had called in fear now looked uneasy, her certainty slipping away. Dr. Carter moved forward, her words sharp, precise, and unshakable. She demanded explanations. She pointed to the cameras recording everything. Her presence shifted the balance of power in an instant. Marcus, still trembling, felt a flicker of safety return, though the fear hadn't left his chest. The officers exchanged nervous glances. The crowd pressed closer. What had started as a simple walk home had now become something bigger, a confrontation between blind prejudice and undeniable truth. And in that moment, as the world watched, it was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The tension broke, but the damage was already done. The officers backed away, their authority stripped bare in front of a watching crowd and the unwavering presence of Dr. Carter. Marcus picked up his books from the pavement, his hands still shaking, his chest still tight with the weight of fear. He hadn't been arrested. He hadn't been harmed, but the humiliation lingered. The truth was clear. He had been guilty of nothing except existing in the wrong skin, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. The woman who made the call slipped quietly back into her home. Her certainty dissolved under the eyes of a community that now questioned her intentions. For Marcus, though, the moment could never be erased. That walk home would remain burned into his memory, a reminder that no matter how much he studied, how polite he was, how careful he tried to be, prejudice could still reach for him at any moment. His mother didn't just comfort him that night. She fought. She filed complaints. She stood before the cameras and the courts, determined to turn one boy's near tragedy into a lesson the entire community and the country needed to hear. But beyond the legal battles and community outrage, one truth lingered. Marcus's story wasn't unique. It was the story of countless others who never had someone to arrive in time, someone with power and a voice that could shift the outcome. So the question remains, how many more walks home will end in flashing lights? How many more lives will be judged by skin before character? How long before suspicion is replaced with understanding and fear with respect? Because until that day comes, no one is truly safe.